Okay, we spoke so far about the concept of the list of the works that are forbidden on Shabbat. They are called the 39 Melakhot, the 39 categories of work. And now we got to actually read the list and see how does it appear in the Mishnah. So this is in the 7th chapter of Masechet Shabbat. And we have before the list, there's a Mishnah that speaks about Klal Gadol, an important rule that was stated regarding Shabbat. כל השוכח עיקר שבת ועשה מלאכות הרבה בשבתות הרבה אין לו חייב אלא חטאת אחת. The punishment for transgressing Shabbat is as follows. If one was warned in advance, then he will be punished by execution, hayav sekila. Now that is a complicated process, and we'll see later on that it complicates also the process of warning a person, because you have to know exactly what is the prohibition that is going to transgress. If there is a lack of clarity regarding what is the category of work, how can you tell him you are going to don't do this because this is forbidden? The way the admonition works is that if you see someone who's about to perform a transgression on Shabbat, you have to tell him, you know that if you do this kind of work, you will be executed. And you have to say what type of execution, and there have to be 2 witnesses. And after that, this is how it is explained by the rabbis in the Talmud. And after that, he has to say, I know, and I don't care. Meaning, I'm willing to die for my transgression. Now, remember, we spoke about Melakhot that could be understood differently, such as Zorea v'Horesh, sowing and plowing. The Talmud later on explains that everything that is done in order to improve the conditions of the tree and its growth is considered plowing. Is it considered sowing? And everything that is done in order to get the final product is called harvesting. So when you trim the branches of a tree, what is it? Is it planting, sowing, or harvesting? It sounds like harvesting, but if you do it in order to trim the tree to make it grow better, and you don't need even if you will use the branches for firewood, but your main purpose is to improve the tree, it's called planting. So now, when you're about to warn someone, you see someone with where someone is about to trim the tree, and you say, don't do that. If you do that, you're going to transgress planting on Shabbat. Meanwhile, it's about harvesting, or the other way around. So this concept is in itself a problem of how does one know that which category of work the transgression is about to perform belongs to. So that is to add to the argument I made before, that the whole idea of categories as categories and subcategories, and they have to be specific on which transgression or which prohibition is there, is artificial, was created by the rabbis. But before that, the concept was just any work that people understand that is forbidden on Shabbat, you don't do. So that's the first rule. The second one is the first one. Sorry, Kol HaShochech Ikar Shabbat. One forgot that one cannot work on Shabbat. Completely doesn't know about that. The Gemara says, how can it be? How can one not know that there is Shabbat? So they say either he forgot that Bnei Israel were commanded to keep Shabbat, which is very strange. I mean, who today and back then definitely would not know. So they say, O tinok shenishba leben hagoyim, o goy shenitgayer ben hagoyim. So either tinok shenishba, a Jewish kid who was kidnapped and raised among non-Jews, so he never knew that there is such a concept of Shabbat. So now he comes to court on his own accord, and he says that he did teshuvah, he repents, and he wants to know what how can he atone for his sin? They tell him, since you didn't know that it's Shabbat, for all of the transgressions, for all of the works that you've performed in hundreds of Shabbatot, you have to bring one korban. It's called korban hatat. That is for doing something indeliberately, unknowingly. Like I said before, if someone does knowingly, after an admonition, after a warning, and after accepting that he's doing that, it's called b'mezid, deliberately, he will be executed. If one does it, im lo yitru bo, hayav karet. But if one did it and there were no witnesses, or he was not admonished, his punishment will come from heaven. And if one does it by mistake or unknowingly, he has to bring a korban called korban hatat. This is how the rabbis explain the structure of the punishment for Shabbat. Wait, before that, a child who was kidnapped and raised among the goyim, that we understand. That still is a common, not very common, but within the Jewish people, but it's a common thing around the world that between tribes, in war zones, kids are and families are misplaced and they're raised in a different culture. But the second example that the Gemara brings for one who doesn't know that Shabbat is forbidden is very intriguing. Goy shenidgayer ben hagoyim, a non-Jew who converted while living among non-Jewish people. Think about the reality of today, how a conversion works, and what the Gemara says, and you say, wait a second. A non-Jew can convert among non-Jews? Who was the bedin? Who's the converter? Right. He is not convertible, right? How can one convert ben hagoyim? He doesn't live among Jews. And not only that, because he converted among non-Jews, he didn't know that Shabbat is forbidden, that you can do work on Shabbat. So, comparing to today, when someone is about to have a conversion, the first question that is being asked, or she being asked, how do you keep Shabbat? If you don't know how to keep Shabbat, and the rabbis grill the person, so what about cooking? What about this? How do you prepare your house for Shabbat? And they go through the whole thing. And here comes a person who grew up in a completely non-Jewish environment, and he says, I'm Jewish. They ask him, how are you Jewish? I converted. I decided to be Jewish. Very nice. How do you keep Shabbat? I said, what do you mean? What is Shabbat? Never heard of it. I said, okay, you have to bring a korban. You made a mistake, you have to bring a korban. You're Jewish, you have to bring a korban. So that shows us that in the original halakha, from the time of the Bible, the time of the Tanakh, converting to Judaism was not about a process, an interview, a bedin, not even Brit Milah. Brit Milah came later, after you become Jewish, and after you keep all the mitzvot, you have to do Brit Milah. You could still survive without Brit Milah for about a year. If you converted right after Pesach, you have till next Pesach to do it, because one cannot celebrate Pesach without having a Brit Milah, and one is not allowed not to celebrate Pesach, so eventually he will have to do it. Exactly. So, other than that, people could have converted among, just they heard about Judaism, so what do they know? They know Elehad. They know that there's one God, and En lo guf, en lo demutaguf, he has no physical representation. Just interesting comment that we see here through the discussion of the Gemara, that they thought of this possibility. Therefore, we have groups of Jewish people, whether there be what we call Maranos, or the Ethiopian Jews, or Judaism was questioned. According to that, there's no question. They know what Judaism is in general, even if by practice certain things are different, they're considered Jewish. Anyway, the rule of the Gemara, the Mishnah is that if one did not know that it is Shabbat, and he performed many works over many Shabbatot, he has to bring one korban. Hayodeh ikar Shabbat ve'asa Melakhot arbe b'Shabbatot arbe hayav al kol Shabbat v'Shabbat. One who knows that it is Shabbat, he knows about Shabbat, but he doesn't know which type of work is forbidden, and he therefore did many things over many Shabbatot, he has to bring one korban for each Shabbat of transgression. היודע שהוא שבת ועשה מלאכות הרבה ושבתות הרבה, חייב על כל אב מלאכה ומלאכה. And if one knows that it's Shabbat, and he knows that essentially work is forbidden, and he did all these melachot, all these works over many Shabbatot, he has to bring one korban for each category of work performed. But if he did many different works that are all similar to each other, he has to bring only one. This Mishnah is the one that gave birth to the idea of the list, of having 39 categories. Why? Because how do you count the melachot? You say someone did many transgressions over many Shabbatot. Now he has to bring a korban, a sacrifice for each and every one of them. How do you count them? How do you decide what is forbidden and what is permitted? And also, what is melachot arbe me'ain melacha achat? Many types of work that fall under one category. So there are not that many examples. You could think about, for example, if you say that the Torah says "Baharish uvakatzir tishbot," you cannot harvest. You cannot. So you will say, okay, if someone harvested his field and picked some fruit from the tree, and he went to his vineyard and cut some grapes, and then he went to the garden and picked some flowers. So each one of them is forbidden, but they all fall under one category of kotzer, of harvesting. But other than that, it will be hard to tell exactly what is the category, what is the subcategory. So as a result, Rabbi-ovadia Nasi created a list of the avot melachot, 40 haser achat, 40 minus 1. Why is it listed as 40 minus 1? There are two different reasons, two main reasons. One is that in Masechet Melakhot, where it speaks about corporal punishment, lashes that are given to a person, the Mishnah says that the maximum number of lashes that could be given to a person, 39. But the Mishnah writes 40 minus 1. By the way, the minimum, that's the maximum. The minimum, the way the rabbis understood it, is as much as a person can tolerate. So sometimes it would be 1. We don't really know of people who receive lashes. The rabbis mitigated the punishments written in the Torah because they understood that it's not about the punishment, it's more about the deterrent, that they have to deter people from doing that, and the punishment don't help. So the Torah says regarding lashes, "V'haya im bin harasha, v'haya im bin hakot harasha." If the judge came to the decision that the person accused is indeed wicked, and is guilty, and deserves to be punished. So they bring him down and they give him lashes in a b'mispar. It has to be counted. 40 yakenu lo yosif. The maximum is 40. Cannot add to that. So the rabbis interpreted 40 and not more, mean 40 minus 1. So that's where we came the term 40 haser achat, 40 minus 1. The Talmud gives another explanation, which is that according to another rabbi, the number of works was 40. So Rabbi-ovadia Nasi, who wrote this Mishnah, made it the point to say, no, it's 40 minus 1, 40 haser achat. That supports the argument that I mentioned before, that the list is not a tradition, Torah le Moshe Sinai. It did not come with the Torah when Hashem handed it down to Moshe, but rather created later by the rabbis. It doesn't mean that one type of work that we think is forbidden is not, but rather that to each work that we put the label forbidden, we have to look whether it's rabbinical or biblical, whether it's from the Torah or not. So now, how was the list created? What Rabbi-ovadia Nasi did was that he took lists that I mentioned before that were already available to people. The list of actions needed to prepare bread, and then another set that is needed to prepare to make clothes from fabric, from wool. Another set of preparing processing leather, including processing meat, processing leather, writing, etc., and then some miscellaneous works. Where do we find those lists before? There's a nice moral teaching in the Gemara about Shimon ben Zoma, who used to say when he saw a multitude of people, he would say Baruch Hacham HaRazim. Says he would thank God, praise Hashem, for creating so many people with so many different personalities and attitudes, and they all created B'Tselem Elokim. He also said Baruch Shebara Kol Elu Leshambesheni. I praise God who created all these people to serve me. Now it was not a selfish or arrogant person. What he meant was that we all serve each other. That when we live in society, each person contributes something. So he said, why does he say that? He says, Bo kama yigiot yaga Adam harishon ad shelo hotzi pat nekiya. So think of Adam, of the first man, or a person who lives alone. Think of Robinson Crusoe on his island. He wants to make bread. What does he have to do? He has to, and then he brings the whole list. He has to do all these works of plowing, sowing, harvesting, winnowing, threshing, grinding, sifting, kneading, baking. Finally, he got bread. He says, but I wake up, I could get the grus kemana, I could get a nice loaf of bread. The Adam HaRishon, when he wanted to wear something, he had to shear the wool, wash the wool, beat it in order to separate the fiber, weave, warp, whelp, do all the work that have to do with the weaving of the fabric, and finally he has one garment to wear. And I could go and purchase that. All those people are there to serve me. It's a nice way to think of how we have this reciprocity and support of each other in the community. That even though we have to pay for services, it really is a service. Someone is serving us, and we have to be thankful for that. But what we learn indirectly from the statement of Ben Zoma is that the list already existed. There was a list of works that people had to do. Now, let's go through the works and see that there are. We'll just do the set of that which has to do with preparing bread. Hazoreah, planting, and included in planting, according to the Talmud, is anything that is done in order to improve the tree. So even watering the plants will be called zoreah, because you're helping the tree grow. Vahoresh, plowing. The Talmud will ask, why did you say zoreah first, horesh later? First sowing and then plowing. So the argument of the Talmud is that this is to teach you that sometimes a person would plow, sow, and then plow again because the ground is very very hard. So that those two different sets of plowing fall under one category. This is a minute issue. Then the next work is kotzer, harvest. That is one that is mentioned in the Torah. Ha-me'amer. What is the me'amer? The word omarim is in the Torah is heaps of wheat. And here, and some say that it's making bundles, making sheaves of wheat. Ben ha'omarim, right. Now, whether it's one or the other, I think that from if we look at it intuitively, we can see that sowing and harvesting would be a work that is forbidden on Shabbat, but me'amer, just gathering all the stalks to a heap, or even making bundles of them, it's hard to see where it is work. How is it work on Shabbat? Right? So the question is, did it make it into the list just because it was part of the original list of making bread, or it's really forbidden? Then we have one hadash, threshing. This is separating the grains from the stalks, and the outer shell of the grain. V'hazore. Hazore is winnowing. Winnowing is throwing the grains after they're being separated from the sheaf. they're being thrown in the air, and the wind blows away the straw, the chaff, right? This is an imagery that appears a lot in the Tanakh, and we say it every day in the Tefillah. You kemotz lifnei ruach. Let them be our enemies like chaff in the wind. The haborer. After this process of winnowing, they would go and by hand remove big chunks of dirt and stones from the grains. Tohen is grinding. Hamraked. Meraked, even though it sounds like dancing, it doesn't mean dancing. It means sifting in a sieve. It's called meraked because you move your hand as if you were dancing. Right. So that's basically filtering. Vehalash and kneading, vehaofe and baking. So all these, there are 11 types of work that are leading to the making of bread. The problem that we have, one of the biggest problems that were created because of that list, is that we have four different works that all have the same purpose, and it's hard to understand why they were written separately. And they are dash, threshing, basically separating the outer shell from the grain. Hazoreh, winnowing, is blowing that chaff in the wind. Haborer, separating stone or dirt from the grain. V'hameraked, sifting. They're all the same. Because of that redundancy of works, of categories, the Gemara went in detail into explaining what are the elements of each type of that kind of filtering that or separating that belongs to one and doesn't belong to other. And as a result, one of the categories of Shabbat until today that is most perplexing and complicated is that of filtering. And people are very, very concerned, observant people who know the halakha are very concerned about that. And some of them apply it even to non-food. You say, you can't after you wash the dishes, you can't separate the cutlery, you can't look at books and move books one book to this, you can't sort out clothes, because all that have to do with filtering, which completely has no basis. Even in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, even less, but we'll get to it when we see the argument of the Talmud, where the Melakhot came from. We'll see why this is a problematic interpretation. But that is the first set. It's called Melechet Achanat Apat. And even if we don't know of all these stages today, at least we should conclude with the positive point of view of Ben Zoma. So we have to be thankful that if we want bread or any made article or object, we can just go and buy it. Amen.